Meet our equine quartet, each with a personality as unique as their coat. First, let's introduce you to Penelope. She's a lively mare with a glossy chestnut coat that shines under the sun. Her sparkling eyes light up at the mere mention of her favorite treat, apples. Just the word apple sends her prancing around, her hooves creating a merry clip-clop rhythm that's music to any horse lover's ears. Now meet Frederick, her partner in crime and in love for apples. A sturdy stallion with a sleek black coat, Frederick is Penelope's constant companion in apple hunting. He shares her love for the sweet, crisp fruit, and like Penelope, his hooves also create a rhythmic clip-clop that echoes through their meadow whenever someone utters the word apple. Then there are Alpha and Omega. These two horses are a breed apart. They're the intellectuals of the group, always observing with a keen eye and a sarcastic quip ready at their lips. Alpha, a majestic gray stallion, and Omega, a beautiful white mare, are the epitome of equine elegance. They exist on a higher plane, preferring the earthy taste of nuts and acorns over apples. Their indifference to the apple frenzy of Penelope and Frederick is palpable, their disdain thinly veiled by their witty remarks. These four horses, each unique in their own way, coexist in a world where their personalities clash and meld, creating a riveting spectacle. Penelope and Frederick's apple obsession, Alpha and Omega's sarcastic superiority, all contribute to the dynamic energy of their herd. But when a couple of other horses come along, things are about to get interesting. Apples. The mere mention of the word sends Penelope and Frederick into a frenzy. Picture the scene, folks. Penelope, a fiery chestnut mare, and Frederick, the ever-so-charming roan gelding, are locked in a heated debate. And what's the bone of contention? Well, it's the humble apple, of course. Now, Penelope. She's of the opinion that the best apples are the ones with the shiny red skins, sweet as sugar, and as crisp as the morning frost. Frederick, on the other hand, he's more of a green apple kind of guy. He'll tell you that the tartness of a Granny Smith is just the kick he needs after a long day of grazing. And so, the two of them go back and forth, their hooves clip-clopping in rhythm with their escalating argument. Red is best, Penelope insists, tossing her mane defiantly. No, green, counters Frederick, his tail flicking in irritation. The apple, it seems, is not just a fruit here. It's a symbol, a testament of their individual tastes and stubborn wills. Meanwhile, Alpha and Omega, the sophisticated pair, watch this spectacle from a distance, their eyes rolling in barely concealed disdain. Oh, the drama over mere apples, Alpha snorts, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Omega, ever the dry wit, adds, Indeed, Alpha, one would think they were discussing the merits of a fine Bordeaux, not apples. Yes, folks, Alpha and Omega find this obsession with apples rather pedestrian. They fancy themselves gourmet, preferring the earthy crunch of acorns and the rich flavor of nuts to the simple sweetness of apples. They watch Penelope and Frederick's argument, their shared amusement a secret language between them. It's a regular day in the pasture until... Wait a minute. What's that rustling sound in the distance? Could it be? Yes, it is. A whole sack of apples carried by two newcomers, Tammy and Steve. And just like that, Penelope and Frederick's debate is about to get a whole lot more interesting. Yet their apple-filled fantasies are about to come true. Enter Tammy and Steve, two horses who've stumbled upon a gold mine of apples. Tammy, a spirited mare with a mane as wild as her heart, and Steve, a sturdy stallion with a glint of mischief in his eyes. They trot along, their hooves hitting the ground in rhythmic harmony, unaware of the spectacle they're about to create. One day, while grazing, they unearth a sack. Not just any sack, mind you, but a sack brimming with the crispiest, juiciest apples you could ever imagine. Their nostrils flare at the inviting scent, and their mouths water at the sight of the shiny red orbs within. But you see, Tammy and Steve aren't particularly fond of apples. They prefer the crunch of carrots and the sweetness of sugar cubes. However, their indifference towards apples doesn't last long, for they soon spot 4 horses in the distance. 2 of them, Penelope and Frederick, are engaged in a heated debate, their hooves pawing the ground in frustration. The other 2, Alpha and Omega, watch from a distance, their expressions a mix of disdain and amusement. As Tammy and Steve approach, they notice something peculiar. Every time they say the word apple, Penelope and Frederick's ears perk up. Their eyes widen and their tails swish with anticipation. It's as if they've heard the sweetest melody, and they can't help but respond. Their reaction is so powerful, so raw, that even the ever-sarcastic Alpha and Omega can't help but raise an eyebrow. Tammy and Steve exchange a glance, their eyes twinkling with mischief. They hold their bag of apples high, letting the sun's rays dance upon the shiny skins. The sight of the apples is like a magnet, drawing Penelope and Frederick in. It's as if they're under a spell. Their longing for the apples so intense it's almost tangible. And so, with a sack of apples and a couple of very interested horses, Tammy and Steve have just turned an ordinary day into an extraordinary adventure. Penelope and Frederick can hardly contain their excitement. What will an apple a day might keep the vet away, but it certainly doesn't keep Penelope and Frederick at bay. Now, if you've ever seen a horse concoct a plan, you'll know it's not as simple as a nod and a wink. No, it involves a lot of nuzzling, neighing, and in the case of Penelope and Frederick, a whole lot of clip-clopping. Okay, Frederick, Penelope begins, her voice as crisp as a freshly picked apple. We need those apples. How do we get them? Frederick, his eyes gleaming with the thought of juicy, ripe apples, starts pacing, his hooves rhythmically hitting the ground. Well, Penelope, we could try asking them. From the sidelines, Alpha and Omega watch the spectacle unfold with amused disdain. Asking? Omega snorts, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Oh yes, because that's worked so well in the past. Alpha chuckles, the sound echoing through the field like a sarcastic echo. And to think we could have been wasting our time on apples. Unfazed by the commentary, Penelope and Frederick continue their planning. What if we distract them? Frederick suggests, his voice filled with hope. Penelope mulls over this, her tail swishing thoughtfully. That could work. Alpha, always one to add his 2 cents, rolls his eyes. Oh yes, because Tammy and Steve are well known for their distractibility. I mean, just look at them. Omega, not one to be outdone in the sarcasm department, adds. Yes, they're practically the epitome of gullibility. I'm sure they'll fall for it. Despite the sarcastic commentary, Penelope and Frederick finalize their plan, their faces filled with determination. We'll distract them and then we'll get the apples, Frederick declares, his voice filled with resolve. Penelope nods, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. Yes, that's what we'll do. And there you have it, folks. Alpha drawls, his voice filled with a mix of amusement and exasperation. The master plan. Omega chuckles, his laughter a sarcastic counterpoint to the serious planning session. With a plan in place, it's time. The best laid plans of horses and men often go awry. But will that be the case for Penelope and Frederick? The stage is set, the plan is in motion, and our two apple-loving equine protagonists are ready to put their strategy into action. With a daring glint in their eyes, Penelope and Frederick step forward. They've rehearsed this moment 1,000 times over in their minds, every clip-clop of their hooves echoing their anticipation. Apple, Frederick whispers, and the familiar thrill dances up their spines. Just then, the witty Alpha chimes in, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Oh, here we go, the great apple heist. I'm on the edge of my seat. Omega merely snorts in agreement, a half-eaten acorn still held delicately between his teeth. The two high-minded horses, ever the spectators, watch the unfolding scene with a mix of amusement and disdain. As the tension builds, Penelope and Frederick inch closer to Tammy and Steve, their eyes locked on the coveted sack of apples. Their hearts gallop with each step, the sweet scent of apples filling their nostrils, fueling their determination. Suddenly, Alpha breaks the silence again. His voice is dry as the desert. Do you think they'll trip over their own hooves? I'd put my acorns on it. Omega chuckles, his laughter like the rustling of autumn leaves. But Penelope and Frederick are undeterred. They move with purpose, their focus unwavering. The sack of apples is almost within reach. Finally, they make their move. A swift dash, a quick snatch, and the sack is theirs. Success. Their plan has worked. They prance around in triumph, their joyous clip-clops echoing through the field. Alpha rolls his eyes, a smirk playing on his lips. Well, I'll be. They did it. Omega simply nods, his gaze still fixed on his acorn. In the end, it's not just about the destination, but the journey. And for Penelope and Frederick, this journey, this dash for apples, has been one they'll never. So did Penelope and Frederick's apple-filled dreams come true? After the dust settled and the echoes of hoofbeats faded, it became clear their plan had worked. The sack of apples, once an unreachable treasure, now lay within their grasp. The taste of victory was as sweet as the apples they craved, and their jubilant clip-clopping echoed through the meadow. But what of Tammy and Steve, the unexpected providers of this bounty? Their faces, initially marked with surprise, soon softened into smiles. They had come to the meadow with a sack of apples, yes, but they left with a story they'd recount to every horse they met. And then we have our sarcastic duo, Alpha and Omega, the nut and acorn connoisseurs. They watched the whole spectacle unfold with the same aloof disdain they'd maintained from the outset. Or so it seemed. Beneath their veneer of indifference, a subtle change had taken place. The sight of Penelope and Frederick's joy, the camaraderie that had blossomed between all the horses, it stirred something within them. Maybe, just maybe, they thought, there was more to life than nuts and acorns. The day drew to a close, the setting sun casting long shadows over the meadow. The horses gathered together, their differences forgotten, their shared experiences forming a bond stronger than any apple or acorn could. They had learned that sometimes the unexpected arrival of a sack of apples could lead to unexpected friendships. They had learned that no horse was an island, and that every horse, whether they preferred apples or acorns, had something to offer. In the end, it's not just about apples, but the friendships formed and lessons learned along the way. So let's raise a hoof to Penelope, Frederick, Tammy, Steve, Alpha, and Omega. Their story is a testament to the power of unity, the strength of diversity, and the undeniable charm of a good old-fashioned apple altercation. As the sun sets, our equine friends go their separate ways. Penelope and Frederick, still giddy from their apple-filled escapade, share a warm, friendly nuzzle. "Now remember, Frederick," Penelope says, her voice ringing with mirth, "the next time you find a sack of apples, you share." Frederick, with a hearty laugh, promises to do just that. In the background, Alpha and Omega are observing the scene with their usual dry wit. "Oh, the melodrama of it all," Alpha drawls, a smirk in his voice. Omega, not to be outdone, adds, "Indeed, it's as if they think they're the stars of some grand tale." Their sarcastic remarks, while biting, are filled with an undeniable fondness for their fellow horses. And then it's time for the final farewells. With a few last whinnies and snorts, they part, each heading to their own cozy corner of the pasture. And so our story ends, but the memories of this apple adventure will forever remain in their hearts.